You attract what you are, not who or what you want to be, but who or what you are in this exact moment. Most people understand that opposites attract. Positive ions attract negative ions and form bonds. You learn that in science class. But when it comes to people, it doesn't work that way. It's true that we're energetic beings conversing with the universe through specific frequencies that we have complete and total power over, meaning it's always within our personal power to change or shift that frequency. We just need to know, first of all, what the frequency is that we're transmitting, how it got to be that way, and then exactly how to go about shifting it. Welcome to Penny's Mind Files Method, the podcast showing you where the off ramp to the healing highway is when you are stuck in the life sucks lane. How many times have you met somebody who's on their third or fourth marriage? If you talk to them, you'll likely learn that every partner was the same as the last, even though they thought they were picking somebody different. You'll hear that a lot, especially in addiction circles. People marrying different kind of addict or a dry one, which just means that whoever it is quit taking the drug of choice, be it alcohol or some other kind of drug, but they didn't actually work the 12 steps of recovery. I know a lot of recovered addicts that never took the time to actually work the steps. So today we're talking about unhealthy personal relationship cycles and why they persist despite a person's best efforts to avoid them. What is it that traps us in those negative feedback loops of repetitive dysfunctional relationships? Well, first of all, we need to understand what dysfunction is. And let's review the dysfunctional scale because every family has some level of unhealthy behaviors. And I say that with confidence because, nobody's perfect. Some families are way at the bottom of the scale, while other people operate in the upper half of the scale. Of course, there's determining factors for categorizing dysfunction. People like categorical boxes because the information in those boxes gives them an excuse. It provides an excuse for unacceptable behavior. It gives people an out because if there's an excuse for why they do what they do, well, then they don't have to face it, right? And ultimately then resolve it because avoiding it eliminates accountability. What they don't understand is that by avoiding facing their behavior and the hows and whys that they do, they're not only trapping themselves into more of the same of whatever it is that they were trying to escape from in the first place, but they're also trapping their children in that same cycle as well. That's how and why generational trauma keeps cycling through the generations. So let's look at some behavior patterns that are generally classified as dysfunctional. So the first one is the caretakers. These are the people who find worth in other people. They're people pleasers. They not only want to be needed, they need to be needed. These are the problem solvers and the relationship fixers and the folks who always have the answers for everybody else's problems. And if they can't solve problems in their immediate circle of people, well, then they'll take on social issues and label themselves advocates of one thing or another. Their cause will be their personal unresolved wounds. These are the self-proclaimed healers who've never healed themselves. They don't believe there's anything to heal because either A, they're still too young to even understand themselves, or B, if they're at least middle-aged, they've never bothered to self-reflect and truly face their own dark side. Their need to take care of and fix is tied to their identity. They honestly believe that their purpose in life is to help others. Other people who fall into this caretaking category are the self proclaimed empaths. They're people who honestly believe that they feel the emotions of others more intensely than the average person, but they don't. It's actually a form of emotional hypervigilance, which is an indicator of unresolved trauma or an unresolved wound. More often than not, the wound will turn out to be uh, the archetypal wound of abandonment. So it's called archetypal because everybody experiences it. But the root of that particular wound isn't what most people think it is. It's a deeply spiritual wound. It's commonly referred to as the fall, right? The abandonment wound is actually the separation of us from God. The next category are the worrywarts and the obsessives. These are people who love to worry. They thrive on the drama. They're addicted to the drama, actually. But when life's going okay, well, they'll make something to worry about. They'll create the drama. People who fall into this category are the super neat freaks. They worry about external cleanliness rather than internal cleanliness, meaning they'll scrub every inch of their house 10 times a week, but never take time to peek inside the filing cabinets of their mind. And why? Because they avoid it because they're too afraid to look in there. So we can find this discussed in one of my favorite spiritual texts, The Course in Miracles. In chapter 1, section 4, it's entitled The Escape from Darkness. What this section teaches is that darkness actually can't be hidden. Even when you think that no one sees your internal conflict, your behavior reveals it, right? Because what you do speaks louder than what you say. But when you finally stop trying to hide that darkness and you face it, you stop being afraid of it. And that is when you find peace. Everybody knows that deep down they harbor dark thoughts, right? Thoughts of revenge and fantasies about punishing whoever it is that harmed you. But attached to those fantasies and even the narratives about the people who harmed you is emotional filters containing guilt and shame, both of which vibrate at the very bottom of the emotional filter frequency scale. Everybody has these kinds of thoughts because when you're wounded by somebody, you focus more on the wound, and the more you do that, the more you want to be vindicated. And we think that we'll find that level of peace if that person who wounded us is punished. Because punishment makes the wound real. It validates the experience. That's why we fantasize about punishment and what we'd like to do to whoever it is that we think is harming us. It's why movies and TV shows that have a hero who, is some kind of vigilante, runs around exacting that kind of punishment. Movies like Man on Fire and The Equalizer and TV shows like Reacher, that's why they're all so popular. I mean, I watched them millions of times. And then finally, the last category is the control freaks. Everybody knows somebody who's a control freak. They're the micromanagers in every workplace, right? The nitpicking partner who can't seem to please no matter what you do. They're similar to the obsessive person because they're highly critical of everyone and everything. They're master manipulators and narcissists. They think that they're showing love a lot of times by looking after everything because they don't believe for 1 second that they're controlling or manipulative, right? It's just that we think they are because our boundaries are being breached. But underneath that intense need to control is intense fear, right? The fear that they don't matter, fear that you'll leave them. It's the same kind of archetypal wound as um, the belonging and abandonment, but it just wears a different coat because belonging and worth are really attached to abandonment. They're really close relatives. So, again, remember that dysfunction is a scale. No one grows up in zero because that doesn't exist. But the level of dysfunction might be way at the bottom, say a one or a two, whereas your family's level was maybe a four or a five. Or maybe you're way towards the top at a seven, eight, or a nine. Maybe you look for a partner whose level would be a four or five because you think that you would benefit from choosing someone who grew up in lower level of dysfunction, right? That you'll be safer somehow. And you probably were for a while, right? Less fights, less abuse, less criticism, less pretending. But eventually it starts to look and feel the same as your family did. Well, because it is. Understanding that it's the emotional intensity that we attach to a narrative, which is dysfunctional, right? Falls in one of those categories. It's a tough concept to really grasp. I know, took me a long time, but once you understand that the narrative is the constant, but the emotional filters create layers of intensity, and it's the layers that make it intense because every layer is duplicating the emotional frequency. So working through the files in the filing cabinets of your mind, once you get that, becomes so much easier because then you'll be able to work through the files a lot faster because you realize you're only dealing with one thing, not really the 400 that's sitting in that file. Remember, the very first sentence in A Course in Miracles is there is no order of difficulty in miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. All expressions of love are the same. So, what that means, right, is that underneath that perceived severity, and in the Mind Files method, what constitutes severity? It's the number of emotional filters attached to a narrative that results in the dysfunction. And ultimately, dysfunction, the level of dysfunction, it's subjective, right? Like what one person determines to be a level 3, somebody else might say, oh, no, that's a level 6, right? Everything is subjective, is based on how you are perceiving whatever behavior. All of those behavior patterns that we discussed vibrate near the bottom of the emotional filter frequency scale. And remember, right, the universe responds to the energy that you're sending out, not what you think, but what you actually believe. And your beliefs are the rigid perspectives that you're holding on to, that your mind's process is referencing, and through the reference, also reinforcing so many times that they've accumulated like who knows how many emotional filters. This is the energy that you actually send out. And people who hold that same energy are attracted to you and they're in your circle. So when you're dating, or even if you're not dating, like say you just randomly meet somebody and you really feel connected, you've pulled to that person. It's because you're vibrating in that same frequency and it feels comfortable. Now, maybe you adopted the opposites attract idea and you form a relationship with somebody who has opposite opinions to you, right? Maybe he's Catholic and you're Protestant or agnostic. And you think, good, I'm going to benefit from this relationship because look at all these things we disagree on. Look at all the ways that we're different. Maybe you think what makes you opposite is degrees of intellect. Maybe somebody has a degree and the other person doesn't. Whatever you think that it is that makes you opposite, because we see what we want to see, right? In other people. That's what the whole looking through rose colored glasses means. We see the attributes in people that we like, and then we pretend to not see the things that we don't like because we want the relationship more than we're willing to admit that the odds are that the relationship's going to fail, because there's definitely things that we're seeing that indicate it's the same kind of dysfunction, just dressed differently. You will only think you're opposite if the level of dysfunction is drastic. But what you're really recognizing is the other person has a habit of referencing the same mind files over and over again. And every time that file is referenced, another emotional filter is added, increasing its intensity or its severity. It's the same dysfunctional belief, but the intensity of the emotions, extreme, causes that person to behave in a higher level of dysfunction than you, leading you to conclude, right, that you're opposite. You're not. You've just somehow managed to stop your mind's process from referencing the similar mind files so often. So then what happens in these relationships is that one person will decide, okay, I'm done with this and I want to get better. I'm going to find a healthier perspective. They're tired of living in the same old, dysfunctional merry-go-round. And so they choose something that they think will get them off that crazy train. Maybe it's a new self-help book, or maybe it's an online course, or maybe they go all out and they hire a psychologist or a therapist of some kind, or a life coach. So what people sometimes don't understand is that the psychologist or the therapist or the life coach, whoever, is going to be vibrating at the same frequency. So nothing in your life is going to really change because nobody on either side here has any idea about the frequency, right? They might have things, though, that you have never heard of and different ways of looking at things. And so that makes you think, oh, they must be living a way better life than me, all because they're explaining something to you in a different way or in a way that you've never heard before. And likely they're also telling you that whatever's happening is not your fault, which is the validation that you were looking for, because it can't be your fault, right? That you're on your 8th relationship that's the same. So you get exactly what you asked for and you think, awesome, I'm all better. And for a brief period of time, your frequency probably is higher, slightly elevated, which is good because there's a brief opportunity there to actually find real change. But more often than not, just as quickly as you rose up, you go back down to your normal. But you learned a few things that were new. So you start setting new boundaries. You don't realize that those boundaries are holding the same dysfunctional frequency because you think you're different, because maybe you only learned about boundaries. And when you were in your therapy, nobody actually did work or made you do any work, meaning you didn't actually figure out all the hows and whys of why you were in that relationship in the first place, how you got there, why you keep picking the same kind of person. And so the dysfunctional cycles continue. But oftentimes these new boundaries that you set are helping you feel better. And so you get lulled into a false sense of security. You think you're in a better place and you're happy that you went to the psychologist or therapist or coach or whatever. And now, oh, my life's finally on track. Everything is going to work out exactly as it should. And it's true, it will, but maybe not what you think, because what that means is you're still vibrating in the same frequency. So at some point, sooner or later, you're going to find yourself in that same emotional place as you were way back when you first asked for help. You see, cycles keep cycling because the only way to stop this cycle is through adversity and challenge. You have to do something you don't want to do. You can't keep doing the same thing expecting a different result, right? You have to muster up the courage to learn how to do things differently. So, if you're a people pleaser, you have to get to the root of why you behave that way. So, get your journal out and start writing. You can start with these questions. Which one of my Mind Files Method core energetic motivational buckets, you can see them there on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, which one of these buckets is being filled when I do what people want me to do, even though I don't want to do it? Is it the self-worth bucket? And if so, how does that add to your self-worth? Is it the love and acceptance bucket? If so, do I really believe that the people I'm pleasing accept and love me for who I am or for what I'm willing to do for them? Am I fulfilling my perceived purpose when I people please? Am I filling my purpose and meaning bucket? And if I am, well, how am I doing that? Do I feel safe when I'm people pleasing? Am I filling my safety bucket? And if so, why? If you're a worrier or have a tendency to be obsessive about things, try to find the originating mind file that's being referenced and reinforced. It's going to have something to do with being punished for something, and the punishment scared you. You might not even be the one who was punished. You might have witnessed a punishment. For example, maybe your dad beat your mom or another sibling, and you watch that beating. Excessive worrying and obsessiveness, like the tendency to be obsessive, is ultimately a fear of facing consequences. Lastly, if you're a control freak, journal about all the reasons why you think you need to control external circumstances. What do you think will happen if you don't? Do you really think that you can control external circumstances? And if so, well, how has that worked for you so far? Isn't that like a Dr. Phil thing? You attract what you are. If you want to attract new and better things into your life, start digging into the files and the filing cabinets of your mind and identify, review, reassess, and resolve the files that are keeping you from moving up the emotional filter frequency scale to the next frequency level, at least. That's it for today. I hope you learned something that can help you help yourself. Please hit that thumbs up so that the algorithm knows that you listened or watched this episode. It helps other people find their way here. And get engaged. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.